Welcome back to Sidekick TV. In this series, I'm joined by Grant Davies from Hamilton, Hindin, Greene, and Ben Brinkerhoff from Consilium. In this series, we're talking about the many points of the investing landscape, of time in the market, Kiwisavers, and particular shares and behaviours. What I'd love you to do is take learnings from these videos and enjoy, but please do remember there is absolutely no personal tailored advice in these videos. So if you do want to take action, then please do engage with one of the advisors. Many thanks, please enjoy. So today, one of the key topics that we want to be discussing is around what is enough to retire. Now, Grant, do you want to kick us off? You've got a couple of areas you wanted to discuss here.
Yeah, well, obviously the first thing you need to think about is what type of lifestyle you want to have when you retire. You know, New Zealand superannuation, I think at the moment is approximately 21k, depending on your life situation. And for most people, I don't think that's going to be enough to live the lifestyle that they're looking for. So obviously, people are going to need to think about ways to supplement that. And you know, we've got Kiwisaver in New Zealand at the moment, but our question today is whether that's going to be enough, or whether people should be adding more to their Kiwisaver.
Because one thing you've kind of discussed is where you talk about the 3%, don't you?
Well, the 3%, it's a funny thing where the number is just government policy. It's not investment policy. An advisor never sits down and says, "Oh, gee, if you put in 3% of salary, that's going to be sufficient to prepare you for the kind of lifestyle that maybe you had grown accustomed to while you're working." It was really a matter of when they were originally creating the rules for Kiwisaver. They said, well, if you put in 3%, your employer will match 3%. If you put in more, that's just you being a good person, right? So people went, okay, I'll put in 3% because that's where my incentives sort of start to dry up.
Yep. What's palatable to an employer was the other thing.
Absolutely. So de facto, people think, well, I'm invested in Kiwisaver. I have government superannuation, NZ superannuation should say. I'm sorted, but they're not sorted. And I think that's the central thing that we want to make sure people recognize.
Absolutely. And if you compare New Zealand's 3% to the global numbers, you know, it pales in comparison. I think Australia are increasing theirs to 11% now, is it? We're lagging a long way behind, and you know, I guess this video is directed towards a lot of self-employed people, and many of those people aren't putting in 3% at all, and maybe even should be thinking about what they can do for their employees to get them to increase it from 3% as well.
Yeah. Because I suppose you touch on that in a bit. The Australia going to 11%, and like you say, there's no good reason for New Zealand being at 3%. But we see that, don't we, in the balances that people have. I've heard that Australian super balances just, again, New Zealand ones pale in insignificance down there.
Well, they've got a head start there as well, of course. They've been doing theirs for an extra decade, I think.
Well, they're doing it longer, and they contribute more. And I think, by and large, they've had longer to be comfortable with investing and are maybe taking greater investment-related risks, which lead over time to higher balances. I mean, we can sit there and compare ourselves to Australia, but ultimately that only matters if we acknowledge that we have to do more in a self-directed way. So we put in our 3%. Our employer does not put in 3%, by the way, because there's this tax. They pay ESCT, employment superannuation tax, contribution tax, and you know, they're gonna chop about 33% of that off. So you're gonna put in 2%. So really, you're putting in 5%. Now, where does that 5% sit in terms of comparison? We know Australia is somewhere near 11, going to 12. United States, which does nothing right in this area, by the way. You would not wish the 401k, 403b system on your enemy, right? But even then, on average, you're putting in 8%. in the United States, right? But it's heavily, it's sort of the wealthy people put in a lot. It's not a great system. But anyways, on average 8%. UK, I think it's above 8%, maybe 9%. Yeah. And in New Zealand, it's something like 6% on average. That actually won't get you to the type of retirement which is equivalent to the lifestyle you have when you actually go into retirement. That's the problem.
And the other thing people need to change their mindset on maybe a little bit is if you put $1 aside today, well, it'll be a dollar in, when I retire. Well, actually, no, you put $1 aside today, depending on what returns are over the next 30 years, it's going to be $15 when you retire, at least $10. There's the numbers compound. Obviously, that's the beauty of the market, and so you're not sacrificing $1. Well, you are sacrificing $1 today, but you're getting a lot back at the end, and so puts the argument for increasing it from 3 to 4 to 5 into perspective.
Totally. And do you think, though, is there another side of this as well where people are just thinking, well, when I retire, I won't have the same lifestyle? Like, do a lot of retiring Kiwis just think, oh, I'll rein it in a bit? What's their actual plan?
Well,
have they made one? That's the question.
I
mean, a lot of people obviously like to travel earlier in their retirement. Worked hard, want to travel. I don't think many will be thinking I can live off, New Zealand super. If you own your own house, you've still only got $350 potentially a week after tax to do the things you want to do. Then you've got rates, insurance, maybe a car breaks down. There's, umpteen things that could require funds. And so, just having that thought about, okay, how much do I need to retire is an important conversation.
I had one of my business mentors said to me, and I never forgot this. He said, people do not run out of money in retirement. They run out of lifestyle. And so what happens is, well before you run out of money, you just absolutely rein it in. And of course, it's not that if you're living frugally that you're miserable. It's that you've cut yourself off from the kind of experiences and opportunities you might have to be generous, to experience new things, to go and to take advantage of some of the opportunities that maybe you've sacrificed in your working career because you were dedicated to your job, and so you weren't able to explore and do things. When people in your family need help, you're not necessarily able to help them to the level that you'd like. So what happens is you remove from yourself those choices. And because you don't have them, you don't make them. And you muddle through. But I suppose as a financial advisor, one of the things you want to do is you want to say, this is where someone's at. It's their current state. But you want them to explore and think and vision, almost like you would any kind of entrepreneur. What would it be like in the future? What could great look like? Yeah. What is great? Tell me okay, not what you're willing to accept. We can get back to what you're willing to accept later. But what would awesome be? And the thing about investing is if you delay it too long, and if your plans for selling your business are not all you hope they're going to be, and that's a little bit out of your control sometimes based on business cycles, then maybe you've left a lot on the table. I think this is super hard for entrepreneurs, by the way. Yeah. Because you ask an entrepreneur, like I own part of the business I work in. A lot of people are in this situation, and you say, well, what's your equity going to be worth in 10, 20? I don't know. Right. So now I would dread the question. If Grant, as my financial advisor, said, okay, Ben, let's do some planning. I have to figure out,
What's your exit plan?
I might be able to tell you what I want to live on in an ideal world. I would never be able to tell you what my business is going to be worth. I hope a lot. Does that count as a question? So my strategy is that I absolutely do save into Kiwisaver, putting more in than 3%. You think, oh, that's a waste of time. Why would you put more than 3%? Because you're going to, the employer's not matching it. Because it's convenient. Because the money is locked away because psychologically it's out of my hands and then out of my. I'm not worrying about what I'll spend. It's put away, and I know if the business went to zero, which I don't think is likely, but is not outside of the realm of possibility, then I'm gonna be fine. And that's actually something I've agreed on with my partner, that we're not going to rely on this. And if the business comes together and it does everything it should do, then you know what? That's a happy problem. I'm happy to address at the time. But if you rely on it, then you could put yourself into a very bad position.
To circle back to the big picture sort of, theory you were looking at before, it's something that financial advisors haven't been very good at asking those questions about where do you see yourself in 30 years. We're very good at looking at the next 12 months and the last 12 months, but looking further afield and asking those big pie in the sky questions is something that I think advisors are getting better at now. But it's certainly something that we need to get better at still, because Kiwisaver advice hasn't really existed to this point. And so now we're looking at 30-year time horizons. We've got to be asking those, more in-depth questions about where people see themselves.
Yeah. And I also think as well, people battle a bit with, like you say, the entrepreneur doesn't want to admit that the business might not be worth anything. There are times, like you'll probably sell a business really well 5 years out of any 10, right? Mm-hmm. Like selling a house will probably go well 7 years out of every 10. There's always these cycles, but it's so difficult for someone to look at this themselves when they're busy running a business. They still have a mortgage at home. They're doing something, hopefully with something like Kiwisaver. They might have some other interests or whatever. It's collating all of that together, and sometimes it's almost like the Kiwisaver is betting against the business.
Absolutely,
yeah, good age.
You are that 100%. That is a reasonable analogy. You are betting against the business. You are preparing yourself so that what you are. You ask someone who's 45. Well, tell me what you want to spend and do and live, and you're 65. Like that's just, people go, I don't know, right? I mean, I know people that unfortunately knocked off in their 50s. It's just it's an obscure time away. So it's very hard and visualize it. And so you just say, well, what I'm doing here is I'm creating options. I want to create the greatest set of opportunities so that you can walk away on your terms. Mm-hmm. With the sort of future that you want. I've locked in the downside, right, which is your Kiwisaver, and the upside is unlimited, right? Yeah. But we've got the downside covered, right? And that's the hedge.
Yeah.
That's the hedge.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a good insurance policy.
100%. It's an insurance policy against I don't know what the heck's going to happen.
Yeah. And the thing is as well, and most people, they won't notice the 3 or 4% that they're not spending because they don't notice it leaving, and so you can just spend it. It can just disappear if you don't do something with it. Yeah.
Well, there's a beauty to this, right? And one of the things that I've talked to people about is you get a raise, right? Well, give some to yourself and then kick up your Kiwisaver 1%. Yeah. Next year, even if it's a raise for inflation, 4% raise, hey, give yourself 3%, put 1% into Kiwisaver.
And you're giving yourself a raise in retirement.
That's right.
And you get the compounding impact of that along the way.
So you're never actually taking less. You're only ever taking more, just 1% less than you were given in your pay packet, right?
Yeah.
So that way you never feel like you're sacrificing. Maybe your paycheck is always getting more, but you're just shaving a little bit off. Because listen. One of the questions that comes up, what do you think, Grant, if someone said, well, if I was only relying on Kiwisaver, what kind of percentage should I be putting away?
Whatever you can afford. But obviously you've got lifestyle now, and that's important as well. You want to make sure you're living your life to, maximising it as much as you can along the way. But yeah, like I say, if you're giving up 1% now, then it grows and becomes larger than 1% in the future. And it's just simple maths. And I guess we're using the history of the share market here. But if you assume a 10% return, which is what the S&P 500's done historically, 3% inflation, and you put $1 away today, in 30 years' time, that's $17.45, adjusting for inflation.
Wow.
So it's big numbers that it can be. Obviously, you want to be a bit more conservative than that when you're forecasting things. But even if you go 6% return and 3% inflation, you're still getting near enough to $3 for that $1.
Yeah.
So there's big money that you can be effectively earning in retirement by giving up a little bit today.
Yeah. And so if we kind of close the loop on this, so people watching this or listening to this, especially the self-employed, some of them might be doing nothing, some of them are hopefully doing something, but maybe looking at the 3%. If we close the loop on this, what Australians are doing, 11s, hedging bets and all of that, what would be 1 or 2 or 3 things someone could do now which is going to improve their situation from a retirement perspective?
Well, like Ben said, go from 3 to 4, I think is low-hanging fruit, isn't it? And I do think, talking my book here, talking to a financial advisor is a good start, because they can help you to see those goals that you might have in the future. And Kiwisaver, there's been a bit of a dearth of financial advice in that space over the years, and now with Kiwi Wrap coming on with a great product, there's more scope to give that advice and make it cost effective for people. Hamilton Hindin Greene is very, very proud to be associated with Kiwi Wrap in that regard. And we're happy to have that conversation with people.
I love the gap analysis idea. Like, it's one thing for you to say, hey, you need to put in 5%, 6%. If I say you need to, I implies I understand your financial situation. Just increasing it sort of on the idea of like vaguely it's going to help is a much different psychological perspective than I've sat down, and if I put in 5%, 6%, whatever it is, I will be at the point where at the age I want to, I'm going to be financially independent. Once you know that that's, and you've done the math and you understand that that's true based on your circumstances, your financial circumstances, your risk profile, things like this, not to use jargon, but once that analysis has been done, then your motivation for going to do it is much, much higher, and your comfort to stick with it is much, much higher, because you've done the gap analysis, right? Mm-hmm. But the math is simple. The more you put in, multiplied by the higher return you get, the better your outcome, right? Yeah. So if you want someone who has a long enough time horizon to have more comfortable retirement, you put more in and you get a higher return, right? And that sounds like it's pie in the sky, but it's very, very simple, right? Those are the 2 things that are going to affect time, return, and contributions. Those are your 3 elements of success. So hard to control time, but you can work longer. But we focus on contributions because that is the one thing that you can do.
Yeah.
And have the immediate impact. And then the more subtle thing is, how do I get a great return, right?
And I'm looking forward to talking about that in our part 2.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Hey, thank you very much, guys. Well, look, hopefully you've enjoyed watching this video. Okay, we will have the links to the guys' contact details in our comments and where you're either watching this video or listening to this podcast. Thank you very much, guys, and I hope this has spurred people into some action if they if this is something that they can make improvements on. Cheers,
Great.
guys.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers. Welcome to Sidekick TV. I'm your host, Ric Thorpe. Sidekick TV is the place for Kiwi business owners and entrepreneurs to learn all about finance, accounting, and how to run and operate a business in New Zealand. We're going to interview experts from the finance realm and fellow Kiwi business owners. Stay tuned.